Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/143. You can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline 202-930-1109, and you can check Pedalshift on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving to you if you are celebrating in the United States. For the rest of you, happy Thursday or whatever, whenever you are listening to this show. Of course, it's a holiday weekend here in the United States, and as usual, I like to try to do something a little bit special on the Thanksgiving holiday episode, and this year, it's going to be the second part of Pedalshift Tour Journals, Volume 12, The Great Allegheny Passage by Brompton. If you're hearing this on the day of the release, which is Thursday, the 22nd of November, I'm doing something a little bit fun with the video that I promised that would be coming out this holiday weekend. We'll be doing a live release of the Great Allegheny Passage Brompton video tomorrow, Friday night, November 23rd at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be in the chat room a little bit early. So we'll be able to chat before, during, and after the premiere of the video. If you're in the States, rush back from your Black Friday shopping. Do we still do that? If you're in Europe, get up stupidly early in the middle of the night. Why? We'll have the chat box so that you can watch the premiere. I'm not going to be actually making the video in the moment, so I'll actually be able to say hello and to chat and take comments, questions on the video as it premieres, and we'll all do that together. Again, that's going to be Friday night, November 23rd, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be in there a little bit early to get things set up. Links to everything will be all over the place. It's going to be through all the social media starting on the Wednesday, and which is the day before you're hearing this, so I don't know why I'm saying that. But in any event, it'll also be on pedalshift.net/live, the usual live channel. It's also going to be done through YouTube. So if you subscribe, which you should, to the Pedalshift YouTube channel, please go there and you will be able to see it. Again, Friday, November 23rd, 9 p.m., the premiere of the Brompton Gap video. On this edition of the journal, we follow along on days 1 and sort of 2 on my ride through Western Pennsylvania. Sometimes weather wins the day. About mile marker, I saw this before, 109, we'll call it 109, and we are at Cedar Creek Park and Cedar Creek Campground. All very good. I'm going to zip up and I want to keep rolling. This was my first potential early stop. If things weren't going so hot, I could have stopped here for the night, still can. I have food. I stopped for pizza in West Newton and it was real good. And I got a large, which is crazy, and I ate more than half of it myself. Forgive me for rolling while we talk. I just got a sign that said, last water till Witsit. That's great. I don't know what that means. I still have two and a quarter full water bottles, so I think I'm, based on the fact that I've gone from Pittsburgh all the way to here on just that, I should be all right. So a little bit of an update, continuing our conversation here. The trail is covered in leaves in parts and is a touch muddy and sloggy in parts. But otherwise, for the most part, it's been pretty good. I find myself on this bike in particular going into lower gears as the day goes on, just to kind of keep spinning rather than kind of pressing into it. I found that makes my life a lot easier, even though it feels like my cadence is a little fast for what I'd like to be doing, and of course I don't feel like I'm going quite as fast as I'd like to go. I don't believe I am riding as fast as I would on the big bike, and I think that just confirms what I've known before, and that is I am just slower on the little clown bike. I think I mentioned the foliage is mostly down now, getting some nice views here and there, but I think as we are slowly starting to go up in elevation, I believe that I'm going to be seeing less foliage. So I think by the time I get to Connellsville, it'll be interesting because I don't think that the elevation gain is terribly much between here and Connellsville. Now, going from Connellsville to Ohiopyle is when you start a more rapid ascent. It's not like it's a really steep hill, but it's there. So there's that. Tomorrow, as I've mentioned, I have not checked the weather forecast since earlier this morning, and I think I'll probably just give an update on that maybe later tonight. But it is weighing on my mind a little bit. I don't mind cold. I don't mind wet. Cold and wet together is a tough slog, especially when there's elements of danger in that. The difference between the spring, when I sort of just said, F it, let's do it, is that I was on a major road that, I suppose I could have flagged down a vehicle, or, I had a cell phone signal in a lot of places. Here, this is about to be coming in a stretch where there is no cell phone signal. Those of you who listened to one of my earlier rides on the Gap know that I temporarily lost an iPhone up in Ohiopyle. And one of the challenges with that was the phone didn't get a signal, so I couldn't do the find my iPhone and do the signal and all that other kind of stuff. Luckily, I did send that message, and somebody did retrieve it and bring it back into the town of Ohiopyle, which gets one baby bar. So the message was, hey, hold on to this thing, blah, blah, blah. So I eventually was reunited with it, which was good because that was an expensive phone. I have a similarly expensive phone, and I intend not to lose it in Ohiopyle or anywhere else. So hopefully my limbs will get me to Connellsville without too much of a hazard today. It's just one of those kind of things where it's just kind of spinning your way there, and I'm not in a huge rush, but I am running out of sunlight. I think I've got plenty to get there, even if I went at half the speed that I'm going right now. That's one of the challenges of cycling in the spring and the fall, is losing the amount of sunlight you have in a day. When you're getting, 16 hours of sun or sometimes more, boy, you can just go forever. On days like today, I'm getting, I think it rose at 7 and it's setting at 5. So you do the math. Not a ton. I'm certainly not cycling 10 hours, but by the time sort of like you get up, I did get up before the sun, took a shower and took care of some other things, but got breakfast and stuff. I didn't get rolling until a little after 8 a.m. And then, you stop for a few things here and there. I'm shooting videos, I'm talking to you, taking some water breaks. It ends up reducing your efficiency, of course, but that's fine. You may be able to hear in the background, I'm approaching Interstate 70, which is a major east-west thoroughfare. I don't even have to look at the sign underneath because I know this one since I've ridden this trail once or twice. It's been an interesting thing. A lot of people, one of the questions people ask is, of course, where are you going? How much is the direct way? Blah, 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 the usual stuff. And with the Brompton, it's particularly like that. People love to ask how much it costs. That's an interesting one. Haven't met a lot of people on the trail today, but I've been seeing a lot of folks out walking, just enjoying the nice crisp air. This really has been a tremendous fall day. I'm really, really fortunate that this first day was such a great day. A little chillier than I think I would have liked, but hey, considering what's to come, this is going to feel like it's a balmy thing. Now you can probably hear I-70 up above me here. Take that all the way to Denver, pretty sure. I may have just made that up. Well, in any event, less than 2 hours or so to Connellsville. Should get there before sunset. Get an opportunity to get things set up. Get ready for kind of a cold night, but I've got a grocery store right there. If I do want to warm up, I've got that as an opportunity. It certainly gives an opportunity in the morning to get a cup of coffee, get maybe a warm breakfast in me, and then up and over to Ohiopyle. And like I said, tomorrow is supposed to be the dicey weather, so we'll just see how that all goes. More to come. Good evening, end of day one from Connellsville, Pennsylvania. I am in my tent. I am ensconced in a down bag. It looks like the drizzle has begun outside. I got in right about at sunset and had just enough time. I did have to break out the headlamp to set up the tent, but that was fine. It's not going to get as cold tonight as I had originally thought, which is good. The real bonus about being here in Connellsville is the fact that I'm inside an Adirondack shelter inside my tent. So from just a heat retention element, I should stay warmer in here. I've reduced the way that my rainfly kind of fits on, so it's a little bit tighter, so should retain the heat in. I notice I've got my vent open, which I will shut after I'm done recording, because that doesn't make any sense to have open. Just to, let the body heat sort of maybe knock up the ambient temperature within the tent at least a few degrees. The good news is that tonight will not fall below freezing, so I don't have to worry about my water bottles or anything along those lines, which is pretty good. I went to the Martins, which is about 100 yards over this direction. I'm pointing. That doesn't make any sense, podcast. But I ended up getting just a couple of things to supplement tonight, knowing full well that I will be able to meander over there in the morning to get breakfast things and then think about what I'm going to do for food for the later stages of this ride tomorrow, should there be one. It's really looking, the rain is definitely coming. It's going to be in the upper 30s, and I have to be honest, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling doing that ride. So I do have the option of staying here in Connellsville, taking a 0 tomorrow, and then just riding through it. The good news would be is that it won't be as wet. It will be just bitterly cold for the next couple of days after that. The air behind this front is definitely colder. So, there's that element to it. And I can push back my train and come back on Monday rather than on Sunday. Clear that with back home. But we'll see how that all ends up going. It may be that I look out tomorrow and I bundle up and I'm warm enough and don't, feel invincible and want to go out. It would only be about a 25-ish mile ride to get to the first town where there would be some shelter available. It would be about 40 miles from here to get to the second one. So, it's just one of those things that it's sort of like, okay, well, what would feel good? Today I did 62, and I think that the last 10 miles or so, I was starting to feel a little fatigued. Just because, as I've noted before on trails like this, you just don't get a break. You're constantly pedaling, and you're pedaling to make motion. There's very little opportunity for coasting or anything like that, and that's why sometimes I find cycling in Oregon or on the West Coast generally, even though there are big old hills, sometimes I find that a little bit easier than on these flat trails. It's counterintuitive, but it seems true. That's about it for tonight. I think that tomorrow morning will answer a lot of questions. I am not intending to get up at the crack of dawn. I think that the timing of this rain will be right around dawn. So, I'm not going to beat it. Since I'm underneath, I'm in a shelter, I don't have to worry about, my tent, packing up a wet tent. Everything's going to be dry, which is going to be A+. I can bundle up, put on some rain gear, go to the store, get something warm in me. I've got my stove, I can do stuff like that. There's all sorts of options. So I think it'll be good. It'll be a good bit of information gathering tomorrow, and I think the forecast will tighten up a little bit, and I'll know when the rain will be starting and ending. So that's it. So it is now, fast forward, Saturday morning. It is Saturday morning. So what happened? Well, I had a great night's sleep, and everything was great in Connellsville. I didn't have any problems. In fact, I didn't see anybody because the conditions were starting to deteriorate rapidly. And that kind of makes some sense why nobody would be biking the trail
as an impending storm was approaching. And so the forecast was right. It was dead on. In fact, it was actually a little bit worse than what had been forecast. The rain started earlier than had been forecast. It started before sunrise. So that meant that I would be riding in the wet no matter what. And I was waking up probably in the early 6 o'clock hour on Friday. And I thought to myself that, this was going to be a hard day. And I got to the point where, as I was kind of flipping through the forecast and looking at what was ahead and what kind of temperatures were ahead, I was realizing that my desire to make this a test of survival versus a fun bicycle tour it wasn't matching what my desires were. I think that sentence made sense. Basically, I got to the point where I realized that this was going to be more of a test of how good is my gear and how much am I willing to push myself versus enjoying a nice fall bike ride like the day before. And then I thought to myself, well, I could take the 0 day. And then I looked ahead at the temperatures that were going to be behind that rain, behind that cold front. And the temperatures were really, really, really cold. I would be having highs in the 30s, lows in the 20s. And at one point, they would be even lower than that. I woke up thinking, wow, it's a little chillier than I thought. I was still comfortable. I was fine. But I was like, oh boy, I'll bet you it's in the 30s. And when I looked at the temperature, it was 41 degrees. This is all Fahrenheit, by the way, folks, for folks in Celsius countries. So well above freezing and really not that big of a deal. That's when I sort of started thinking maybe I'm just not in the right frame of mind for something like pushing forward. And I was reflecting on what a great day Thursday was and how fun it was and how I had, ridden 62 miles on that little clown bike, and I'd really gotten through a lot of stuff. And then I was like, okay, well, the bummer is that if I decide to call this, I knew that the train comes through Connellsville on the way back to DC very early in the morning. And so I was looking at that, and then I saw that it was about 2 hours delayed, which meant that I could very comfortably pack up, go get breakfast, go handle things, switch my ticket, and still get there in time without having too much of a hassle. And that basically all added up to circumstances saying, you know what, this is probably the right place to say, hey, you know what, you rode for one day, but you did it in a place you don't get to go to very often. And sometimes weather just says, yeah, no. And that ended up making my mind for me, given the terrain that I had and all of that other kind of stuff. Have I felt a little bit of regret since then? Yeah, some here and there. But here's a couple of things that happened as I was packing up that I'm reminding myself of every time. When I went out in the rain to get breakfast, I packed up all the stuff and rode the bike about, if it's 100 meters to the grocery store, I'd be surprised. It's really, really close. It's a great camping spot. When I went out in the rain, I noticed that the water didn't really roll off of my rain pants very well. These are not built as rain pants, the ones that I wear. They're great. They're super comfortable, but I treated them with basically silicone spray. And I should have done it before this trip because I noticed, especially on my quads, basically where the rain really goes, the rain was soaking in more than it was rolling off. I wasn't feeling it through, but the one thing I'll say is that means that over the course of the day, I was going to get water penetration there. I probably would have worn an additional layer underneath that, but if that had gotten wet, things would not have been as comfortable, and I also wouldn't have had that layer to wear going to bed that night if I was camping. So that's a problem. The other thing that I noticed was my rain gloves. I had totally forgotten about this. They had split on my last ride, and they were not obviously fully covering. It was right at the right thumb. So I had some gear issues. And when I noticed those things, that really reinforced my decision, because if you have incomplete gear, then that's a real problem. But it also got me thinking, wow, what a dodged bullet, because if I didn't have that option, I didn't do a very good job of looking at my gear and giving it a real once over before I left. I mean, these were really obvious things. I did look at the can of silicone spray that I have before I left and thought, oh, should I retreat my pants? And I thought, nah, don't need to. Well, that was silly. and I just grabbed my waterproof gloves thinking, oh, great, no problem. But they're probably no good anymore. I mean, I don't know if I might have a chance to be able to stitch them up and maybe rescue them. But yeah, that would have been a real problem if I had been in a situation, let's say that I wasn't in a town that had a train and I did have to ride through that, 20, 30, 50 miles to get to a bailout point, or that I was sort of committed. That would have been a real problem. So one of the takeaways that I have that I'll talk about later, of course, in sort of a takeaways episode, is that you really got to give your gear a once over every single time you go on a reasonable sized trip. So as I lie here, you may or may not be able to hear the pugs snoring around me. I think that I made the right choice. I'm a little bummed because if you go back to the live show, my original intention was not only to ride the Brompton all the way from Pittsburgh, all the way to DC. I only got one day of riding out of it, but sometimes circumstances and weather and terrain and equipment say, you know what? This isn't a go now, and that trail will be there for me next time. And I do think that the Brompton can absolutely do the gap. So I think that's something that I'm going to tackle next year, because I really enjoyed the process of the whole thing. And I thought that the bus situation was a pretty good one, especially if you can get a cheap ticket up there. Drops you off at a decent time, and under different circumstances with different amounts of sun, different weather, could be actually a really good ride with the Brompton. So that's something that I'm going to think about as well. I should also mention the process of coming back. I was able to cancel my ticket and redeposit. Basically, it was a voucher in the first place that from prior trips that I didn't take this year, from refunds from a Harper's Ferry ride, and all the various struggles I've had with these trails over the course of this year because of weather. It was such terrible weather this year. So I do have an e-voucher for future Amtrak travel, which I'm sure I'll use. And then I purchased the new ticket. It was a strange scenario because the train was late. When I was booking the ticket, it was after the train was scheduled to have arrived. So the online apps that I usually use didn't work. They said, there's no train, dude. I'm like, oh, there is. It's just late. So I had to call Amtrak, and they were able to help me. No problem. But rather than kind of say, oh, yeah, and I've got this e-voucher, and hold on a second, let me dig it up out of the phone while I'm talking to you, I just couldn't be bothered with that. The ticket was, I think, $40 or $44 or something like that. So I was like, all right, that's fine. And then I can use the e-voucher for a later trip, which I'm sure I'll use. So got that all set. While I was gone, there was an issue with my girlfriend's Jeep. And she had to brake short and got her tea that she had in the cup holder spilled all over the console. Okay, well, it was a mess and whatever. Well, it turns out that it created an electrical problem. And so she not only couldn't use the key fob to start the car. Wow, that was weird. It also put the parking brake on. So after both of our keys didn't work for her to be able to go out and do her stuff the other day, she had to get it towed to get it serviced. Why am I telling you all this? Well, there was no easy way for her to go get it. But when I was coming back, I was at Union Station, and I could hop on the metro and bike the last, quarter mile to the Jeep dealership and get down there. Except, turns out that yellow line wasn't going all the way down there, and that they were doing shuttle buses on a holiday weekend. During rush hour commute, they were starting all of that. Wow, that was crazy. So I ended up having to haul all of my gear through the Washington Metro system, only to find out at Pentagon City, which is There's a mall there. It's by the Pentagon. If you're not familiar with DC, it's on the Virginia side. That's where I was sort of stranded. So eventually I was like, okay, well, let me get a ride from Lyft. Got on a Lyft and went all the way down there in the worst DC traffic I've ever been in. I was more exhausted yesterday just getting myself and my bike and my gear, hauling it through places with escalators and stairs, not very easy places to make it work. And getting to that Jeep dealership than I was riding 62 miles on the Gap. Meanwhile, I was thinking I could have taken a 0 day. Could have taken a 0 day. I could have been sitting there drinking hot coffee and hot tea all day, just kind of chilling, hanging out, listening to podcasts and watching videos, only to just go bike in the cold the next day. Well, sometimes we make choices, right? Anyways, I got the Jeep. I drove back in all the traffic, circled around for parking in DC for a while, thinking I could have been on a bike tour. But you know what? Waking up this morning with the pups, warm and happy and dry, I think I ended up making the right choice.
Statistics for days 1 and 2. Bike miles biked 31. Campsites 1. Tours scuttled by inhumane conditions 1. Train miles trained 236 and Jeeps rescued 1. On the next edition of Tour Journals, Volume 12, Great Allegheny Passage by Brompton, the follow-up and takeaways episode coming to you next week, episode 144 of the Pedalshift Project. We like to close out the show with a big thank you to all of the supporters of the Pedalshift Project through the Pedalshift Society. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings. We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month helps with the cost of hosting the podcast, the website, and more. And you can do it for a little bit, cancel anytime. One-shot support's welcome if you're not into the whole small monthly thing, and you can check it all out and join at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hepwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Bucket, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Mark Messer, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, John Baxter, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Brian Patterson, and thank you to all anonymous and past contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.